writers and book lovers, Miranda Darrow here, freelance fiction editor. In my videos for the last 2 weeks, I've talked about the alternate history subgenre of sci-fi, also called alt history. That inspired me to write this month's writing tips video about world building, and these tips can apply for fiction authors of any genre. So here are 10 tips for world building in fiction. World building is the secret sauce that transforms a good story into an unforgettable experience. Whether you're crafting a sprawling fantasy realm, a near future dystopia, or a small town contemporary setting, building a believable and immersive world is essential. Here are 10 practical tips to help you master the art of world building. 1. Start with the rules. Every world needs its own logic. Define the foundational rules that govern your universe. Laws of nature, magic systems, societal hierarchies, even the quirks of a small town community. These rules provide consistency, making your world feel authentic to readers. Note, your characters don't need to follow all of these rules. Many times, it's great for them to think about breaking them, or even actually break those rules themselves. But then there needs to be consequences. And this makes for awesome conflict and tension. Apprehension for readers if they are debating it in advance. 2. Anchor in the familiar. Even the most fantastical settings should have touch points of familiarity. This gives readers a sense of grounding and allows them to connect emotionally. A bustling marketplace in your fictional kingdom might echo a modern farmer's market, complete with unique local quirks. Or maybe they have a cozy corner of their house where the main character sits to read books or scroll on their tablet to unwind, or where their family unit gathers to watch the news or whatever is happening in their world. Bring a touch of the familiar, especially if your world is very different, to show that your characters are still like the readers in many ways. 3. Think beyond the surface. What's beneath the visible landscape of your world? Consider things like economics, religion, political systems, and history. These unseen layers add richness and depth, even if only glimpsed through dialogue or character interactions. Think these elements through while you're writing, or before, if you love to brainstorm your world building. But do not give all this information to readers, especially not all up front in a world-building info dump that gives the history, the geopolitical, and geographical background for your whole universe before you even introduce your main character and their goal, motivation, and conflict. The world-building details that you share with your readers should be the tip of the iceberg, just the small parts people can see, but the rest is lurking below, impacting the characters with some hints. And if and when those details become relevant, then they come to light, which brings us to point number 4, which is focus on details that matter. Not every piece of your world needs to be in your story. Instead, focus on details that enhance the plot and deepen the emotional connection. If your protagonist is navigating an alien city, the smell of the air or the feel of the cobblestones can be more powerful than a lengthy description of architectural history. Introduce the world-building elements that are important to the story, that will impact the reader, and only introduce them in small bites before the reader needs to know them, but not all up front. Dole these out in small nuggets of gold to be savored by readers who are building this world in their heads. Create your own story universe Bible that you can use, especially if you're writing in a series or in a shared universe with other authors. Capture all these details so you can keep everything consistent and logical, but you do not need to put all of your story universe Bible in your pages of your novel. Tip number 5, see it through the eyes, ears, nose of your character. Your world comes to life through your characters. Show how they interact with their surroundings, adapt to cultural norms, or resist societal expectations. A protagonist struggling with their place in the world can provide natural opportunities to reveal its intricacies. How a newcomer reacts to seeing a setting is very different than someone who grew up there. A lifelong resident wouldn't describe all the colors and smells and sounds of the marketplace as that's what they expect. They would really only comment on things that were different, changed, unexpected. Like if my main character is describing their own house, they aren't going to comment on the shade of blue of their couch, not unless that couch is missing or on fire. If you're writing a unique universe like high fantasy, having a character who is a stranger showing up in a new community gives a great opportunity for this character to naturally describe and react without it coming off as unnatural or info dumping. Many fantasy stories show world building through the eyes of a traveler or a newcomer. Tip number 6. Language and cultural. Language shapes culture. Consider creating slang, idiom, or even unique phrases specific to your world. Like a phrase like, may the winds guide you, could indicate a seafaring culture or a society that reveres nature. I just finished reading 5 Broken Blades by Mai Corland, and she has subtle references to the 10 hells. We never got an in-depth explanation of what the 10 hells were or why that was important, but it was repeated enough that showed something about these characters and the world they were living in. It always reminds me of the use of the word frack as an oath or a swear in the Battlestar Galactica series remake, often referring to the robots as frackin' toasters. And let's not even get started with key phrases like make it so or this is the way, which become so ingrained with how viewers or readers think of entire groups of fictional characters. Tip number 7, respect the power of geography. Geography isn't just about maps, it influences trade, culture, conflicts, and alliances. A mountain range separating two regions could explain centuries of cultural differences or host the dramatic encounter that your plot demands. I love it when authors include maps of their fictional worlds in their books, and there are great services available to help authors to construct a fun map to include. But even if you don't map it out, make sure it's logical, as many readers may be constructing their own mental maps or even physical ones, because readers can get crafty. So everyone needs to be consistent and logical with your universe. If the land to the north is impassable because of ice and mountains, then characters can't just wander through there in a day without some explanation. If there's a river with only one bridge, then everyone needs to take their chance with the trolls shaking down the billy goats, or they need to pay the ferryman or whatever. You can't just ignore it and have a character jump from east to west without at least one line acknowledging this world building hurdle that you've already constructed. For this aspect, I like to think of the TV series 24, that every season was set during a 24-hour period, and each of the 24 episodes in the season was 1 hour of that day. Something important had to happen every hour because this is TV. There were seasons set on the West Coast and some were set on the East Coast, but they didn't want 4 episodes in a row where Jack Bauer was stuck on a plane flying across the country. Personally, I would probably spend a full hour watching Kiefer Sutherland sitting in coach reading Sky Mall magazine, but that's me, and I really like Kiefer. And I would probably listen to him read a phone book that whole time, too. Your audience would expect more. Think about how long it would take your character with their resources to get to the places and account for it. You can adjust your world building fit your needs, unless you're writing a sequel in a series where you've already published some aspects that you need to work within, and be consistent and logical. Tip number 8, anticipate the why questions. Your readers will wonder why things are the way they are. Why does this kingdom outlaw magic? Why do the townsfolk fear the forest? Be prepared to answer these questions subtly through context, avoiding heavy-handed exposition. You want to point readers to be asking the right story questions and not to get distracted with minor details, as that distraction can cause readers to miss out on more important story points and story questions. If the readers are too busy trying to figure out how the system of government works with two kings over the same land, or the impact of how having 3 moons throws off the tides, that they miss the central plot, find a way to explain what is necessary about the world building to keep the focus on the main character's goal, motivation, and conflict, and their quest to achieve that goal. Tip number 9, blend conflict into the fabric. Worlds aren't perfect, and their imperfections are where stories thrive. Introduce conflict into your world's framework. Resource scarcity, cultural tensions, environmental hazards can all add stakes and urgency to your narrative. Really, no one wants to read a story about happy people in Happyville. That's dull. The good news is, I agree with Ursula Le Guin that every utopia contains a dystopia, and to some person, that ideal world would be a nightmare. So have that person be in your world. Whether your story has a ton of conflict with an overtly oppressive regime, like Pierce Brown's Red Rising, where people are living underground on Mars, working in dangerous mines for scraps, or it's more subtle, more demure, that things are pretty good, except grandma gets killed on her 75th birthday, and no one is allowed to learn how to write on paper or read anything without the government monitoring it, as the world in Ali Khani's Match trilogy. It's written as a utopia that really wasn't. Sow those seeds of conflict in the world building, early and often. And then finally, tip number 10, evolve the world with the plot. A well-built world doesn't stay static. Let the events of your story ripple through its fabric. A war, a new leader, or even the discovery of an ancient artifact should have lasting consequences, giving your world a sense of realism and progression. Just like if you have a character returning to their hometown after decades, they will comment on what has changed, what is changing as a result of the passage of time, but also the events from the story. The mayor lost the election, and now the community garden is being torn up for condos. Oh no! Final thought. Balance is the key. World building is about striking the right balance between details and story. Your readers do not need to know everything that you've created, just the parts that enhance their connection to the characters and the stakes. Keep them curious, invested, and eager to explore every corner of the world you've brought to life. With these tips, your world will not only support your story, but become a character in its own right, one that readers long to revisit. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for new videos every week. Next week, the Writing Craft book review of the month will be my review of The Story Equation by Susan May Warren. Happy writing!